Gordon Moore isn't a household name, yet his work can be found in practically every home and workplace in the developed world. Moore, who would go on to become Intel Corporation's president and later chairman emeritus, was not nearly as well known when he articulated what we now call Moore's Law in 1965. The name was coined by Dr. Carver Mead, professor at California Institute of Technology, also known as Caltech.
Who is Dr. Gordon Moore?
Outside of the semiconductor industry, his last name is far more known than his first name, yet he is one of the most notable persons in the semiconductor world. He was born in California in 1929, before the first working transistor was even made. We can't say that his career path was obvious at that time. His first interest in chemistry was developed when his neighbor got a chemistry set and he found some interesting things he could do with it.
I decided right then I wanted to be a chemist, although I didn't quite know what one did.
His most fond memories of that time are making explosives with his chemistry set in laboratory he set up at his house. He says getting real chemicals was pretty easy at that time, and he even got his hands on a TNT, which he later detonated.
And I did. I ordered them and tried it out and detonated it.
Later on, he studied at University of California in Berkeley and Caltech, where he received a BS and PhD degree in chemistry. His professional career started with William Shockley at Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory, but later on he left to found his own company called Fairchild Semiconductor. Only 3 years after Moore's Law was published, he founded NM Electronics, which later became Intel Corporation. Moore worked in various executive positions at the company over the years and became its CEO in 1979, a position he held until 1987. In 2022, Intel renamed its main site, the Ronler Acres campus, into Gordon Moore Park after their founder.
That's why I considered myself an accidental entrepreneur.
But what is Moore's Law?
Today, almost every person on this planet that owns a cell phone or a laptop is a billionaire. But not in the money sense, but in transistors. Processors in today's phones and laptops hold billions and billions of small electrical components known as transistors. Transistor is a semiconductor device used to amplify or switch electrical signals and power. Almost like a light switch, but on a much smaller scale. Today's mainstream processors use 5 to 7 nanometer transistor size, with experimental transistors becoming as small as 2.5 nanometer and laboratory samples as small as 1 nanometer. Just to put the size into perspective, this is smaller than the width of human DNA strand and about 50,000 times smaller than human hair. In 1965, Dr. Moore predicted that the cost for transistors will decrease at about 37% per year, which results in about 99% decrease in cost in 10 years. He also noted that the number of transistors in a circuit had doubled approximately every year. 10 years later, in 1975, he revised his forecast to approximately every 2 years. While the law mostly held the test of time and the number of transistors in mainstream processors approximately doubled every 18 months, here is what Dr. Moore has said in 2005.
It can't continue forever. The nature of exponentials is that you push them out and eventually disaster happens. Is there a problem with Moore's Law?
Dr. Moore's predictions became the driving force behind the semiconductor miniaturization race that led to proliferation of computers and other electronic devices. There is no doubt that he made brilliant observation all those years back, but his law needed to be amended over time to reflect the true growth of transistor density. The challenge for Moore's law is the underlying complexity of semiconductor process technology, which has been increasing. Transistors are now three-dimensional, and because of the tiny size of today's sophisticated process technologies, numerous exposures are necessary to duplicate these features on silicon wafers. This has increased the complexity of the design process and slowed Moore's law. One other problem with making transistors so small is tied to the physics itself. Transistors are approaching the size of atoms, which is a fundamental barrier which at this time cannot be solved by just engineering. Transistors are made from silicon, which is the second most abundant material on our planet. Its atomic size is about 0.2 nanometers. With transistors approaching this size, there is simply not enough space at the atomic level to make these components any smaller with currently used materials and technologies. The most interesting technology that might be viable in the future are transistors which use light instead of electric signals to communicate. Researchers achieved very promising results with using graphene instead of silicon, with the goal of replacing silicon as the main transistor material. Today, the prediction stands at around doubling the amount of transistors every 18 months.
So, is the Moore's law dead?
This deceleration has prompted many to wonder, is Moore's law dead? The short answer is that Moore's law is not dead, although different titans of the industry tend to disagree on this topic. While chip density is no longer doubling every 2 years, and therefore Moore's law is no longer true in its strictest sense, Moore's law is still producing exponential advances, albeit at a slower rate. Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, says Moore's law is far from dead. He said in 2021 that his objective for the next 10 years is to not just maintain but to exceed Moore's law. In an interview with Tech Republic, Mario Morales, a program vice president at IDC, stated that Moore's law is still theoretically valid.
If you look at what Moore's law has enabled, we're seeing an explosion of more computing across the entire landscape, he said. It used to be computing was centered around mainframes and then it became clients and now edge and endpoints, but they're getting more intelligent, and now they're doing AI inferencing, and you need computing to do that. So, Moore's law has been able to continue to really push computing to the outer edge. Mario Morales, IDC.
On the contrary, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said on multiple occasions that Moore's law is dead. He also believes that the wafers from which chips are produced are much more expensive than they were.
The method of using brute force transistors and the advances of Moore's law has largely ran its course.
While most agree that Moore's law is slowing and may soon be replaced, it is still driving advancements in processing technology and the amount of progress that follows these advancements. It couldn't do this if it were dead.